Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers. The only way to embrace Islam was to confirm what I already knew to be undeniably true. My heart could not deceive me, it felt as if a door was standing before it, open wide, inviting me in. I took the first step inside, and with that step, I realized that this was not only what I had always been searching for, but it was also what I had always been at my core. I am immensely grateful for the ability to walk this path. As a Muslim of Scandinavian origin, I often reflect on why I became a Muslim. Why was I raised in this way? What led me to this blessed path of Islam? When I look back on my life, I see that my current situation is the logical outcome of my actions and thoughts up to that point. But of course, this is true for everyone. Converting to Islam, or rather, accepting the fact that I had always been a Muslim, was inevitable. I wasn't satisfied, neither mentally nor spiritually. I wasn't seeking to free myself from any attachments as I began to search for answers to life's big existential questions. I hadn't attached myself to any established religion, but I firmly believed in a power beyond us all that resides in everything. I believed in the One, and I was uncompromising in accepting anything less than God without a partner. This belief also led me to confront my inner illusions. Before I describe what those were, I want to share some of my experiences as a Hindu in India, living with my guru and spiritual guide. These experiences were significant in my spiritual journey. Near the Agm Sharif in Rajasthan, India, I felt that any question I asked about life was answered by a voice within me, always with the same response: God's love. Or perhaps the truth didn't come as three separate reactions, but as one unified answer that became everything for me. Since then, everything else seemed like a projection from that fundamental principle. I was completely overwhelmed. Perhaps 3 consecutive days passed in a trance-like state of mind, but the feeling of the truth of this divine love remained in my heart and mind for years. I'd like to mention another experience in the ancient city of Hampi, India, now mostly in ruins. There's a temple on a hilltop outside Hampi from where chanting can be heard. One afternoon, I decided to visit the temple with a group of other explorers, mostly foreigners. To reach the temple, we had to cross a river. The ferry turned out to be a large cooking vessel, with 4 passengers seated precisely to keep it balanced. As the river slowly passed by, we moved together towards the mountain. The temple was located just above a point where 2 massive stone slabs met at an angle, and as we approached, a loudspeaker became visible. It became clear to us that the constant chanting we had heard in the old city wasn't the work of rows of monks in devotion, but rather an illusion created by a recording that had been playing for hours. Night fell, and we decided to stay where we were. Climbing the mountain in the dark didn't seem like a good idea. But then something happened that changed my perception of myself forever. The chanting continued throughout the night, growing more intense until we all felt a deep pain in our heart. There was no communication between us, only contact through looks and smiles, under the comfort of a full moon. We were all engaged in some form of meditation. At one point, I went to a nearby river to refresh myself. As I reached down to the water, a thought suddenly struck me: if I wanted to get closer to God, I could. Immediately, I found myself flat on the ground, my posture shifting from reaching for water to my first prostration before God. For the first time, my head was on the ground in submission to the Creator, acknowledging the one and only God, Allah. This experience brought a profound certainty to my heart: if this was indeed the truth, then all truth, all religion, and everything else came from the same source. The force of this realization hit me so powerfully that even 30 years later, I can still recall the awe I felt that night on the mountain. Upon returning to Europe, I didn't bring much of my Hindu practices with me, except for yoga. I had come to see the similarities between all the world's religions and instinctively knew they were all the same. They were all messages of peace, the original manual for mankind, guiding us on how to navigate this existence. It seemed to me that the passage of time and environment had caused these religions to appear different. In some cases, extra material had been added to the original message, while in others, something had been removed. I knew I had to seek the source from which all religions originated, a place where I could drink from the purest of waters. I knew it had to be out there somewhere, but I didn't know where or how to look. I had just taken the first step and was at the threshold of a new world. I moved to the countryside in Denmark, where I spent much of my time tending the garden. I tried to direct my thoughts toward the Lord in everything I did. Occasionally, I would retreat to my room, sitting quietly in a cross-legged position, praying and seeking His guidance. I was afraid to ask anyone for guidance because I knew the world was full of people who could easily mislead me. So, I kept asking God, speaking to Him directly, "If you are there, you can hear me. If you are there, you can see me. If you are there, you know my needs. I am blind, deaf, and dumb. I don't know what is good for me and what is not. Show me the way. Open a door for me. Give me guidance." I often spoke to my friends about God and the eternal principle of God, and as a musician, I wrote songs about my longing for Him. One day, an old friend, whom I hadn't seen in years, approached me. He had become a Muslim in the meantime. We met a few times, always talking more and more about religion and related subjects. He was planning a trip to the Sahara Desert to learn from 2 Arab tribes and asked me to join him since he knew I had crossed the Sahara before. I immediately agreed to go along. The desert had always fascinated me. Before setting out, I made it clear to him that I had no interest in becoming a Muslim. I wouldn't mind living among them, but I wouldn't convert to Islam. A few days later, I left my house in the countryside and went to Copenhagen to prepare for the journey. My friend lived in a house with other Muslims, and I moved in with them while we got ready for the trip south. The first night I spent with them was in May 1982. In the deep of night, I suddenly heard someone shouting. Initially, I thought this person had lost his mind, but the others just got up quietly, started washing, and prepared for prayer. I felt ashamed, more ashamed than I had ever felt before. I had wanted to pray for years and had prayed occasionally, but always only giving God the leftover time after I had taken care of all my personal needs and whims. These people were giving God their prime time, when the bed is at its sweetest. Just before dawn, I asked if I could pray with them, and they willingly agreed. In my mind, I thought they could pray to their Arab God, while I tried to set things straight with my God. I didn't realize I was heading straight toward my permanent place on the prayer mat. Living with them, praying with them, eating with them, and discussing with them, I finally came to see what had been veiled from me until that point. I had arrived at the starting point. I could now outwardly practice what my heart had been yearning for inwardly. Embracing Islam was merely confirming what I already knew to be true. There was no choice, my heart did not lie in what it now perceived in front of it. The door was open, and I took the first blessed step inside. After entering, I realized that this was not only what I had always been looking for, but it was also what I had always been at my core. I had always been a Muslim in my heart. I am, and will always be, grateful for the gift of this path and the certainty of my Lord's ever-flowing generosity. Thanks for watching. Please remember to subscribe for a